Okay, recording has started. Yeah, welcome everyone to our episode 13 on Future Fit Benchmark. Today we have Martin Rich, who joined us for the presentation and brought Elisa with him. Welcome, both of you, and thanks for taking from your time. Yeah, this is the sustainability working group from Incoze, and also we have people from outside of Incoze, and we have the project Sustainable Together. I think I already showed you a little bit on it, Martin. If not, we can talk about it at the end, and probably we also have some collaboration possibilities. Yeah, to I would just like forward it to you. You can present yourself and then start presenting your thing.
That sounds great. I'm just going to try and share my screen here. Let's hope that allows. Can you see that okay, Hamza? Yeah.
Yeah, that looks good.
Perfect. There we go. Great. Well, thank you, everybody. Given that you're all around the world, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, depending where you are. Greetings from London, England, where, hurrah, the sun has been shining today. I know the Brits always talk about the weather, but we are particularly delighted that it has actually finally stopped raining, and it's been a very pleasant spring day here, so that's great. Commiserations to those of you on the east coast of the States, where I believe you're currently under about a meter of snow. So by way of very quick personal introduction, I can, at least in this esteemed group, claim to be a humble engineer. I trained at Cambridge University as a civil and structural engineer back in the mid 1990s. I then, like all good engineers, went off to the City of London to be a financial engineer, and I worked in the derivatives markets for UBS, HSBC, and JP Morgan for about 13 years. Up until 2008, 2009, the subprime crisis. I was not responsible for that, so please don't hold me personally liable for it, although I do know several of the people who were responsible for it, but there we go. Anyway, I stepped out of the market at that point and decided to try and do something a little bit more value additive in my life. So I went and joined the impact investment sector, which was just growing predominantly from the UK back in, I said, late 2009, 10, 11 sort of era. So I worked in that for a few years, and that was what ultimately gave birth to what became Future Fit Foundation, which is my non-profit, which was formally founded in 2013. And I'm going to tell you all about our methodology and our approach. But what I want to do sort of over the sort of half an hour or so is I'm going to start in a slightly different place. We're going to talk a little bit about vision. We're going to talk about why we're doing what we're doing. And I'm going to give you a little bit of a story about that. Then I'm going to dive into the Future Fit Business Benchmark, our open source methodology. We'll talk about that. Hopefully that will really resonate with a few of you as a very useful tool to help businesses transform to be the type of regenerative businesses we need if we are going to flourish or indeed survive as a species into the future. And then I'll sort of bring us into land with a few case studies of organizations, businesses around the world that have used the framework to sort of try and ground it in a little bit of reality. In the midst of that, I'll touch into where I think it overlaps with some of the other frameworks. This introduction ultimately, I think, was made via our friends Anthony Upwood and co in Toronto. So that was sort of how we connected in to you. And I know that you've had a couple of presentations earlier on in this series, which our work overlaps with. So don't worry, I'm not going to bore you with issues of why we have all the problems that we have. We'll touch on those very briefly, but I'm assuming that given that you are the sustainability working group, you are all aware of these issues and you are concerned about these issues and trying to do something about them. So we'll focus on that rather than, as I say, sort of lecturing you on whether or not these issues are real. Future Fit Foundation, this is our vision. This is what guides us. Future Fit Society will protect the possibility of humans and other life can flourish on Earth forever by being environmentally restorative, socially just, economically inclusive. Again, I probably don't need to tell you that is not the socio-economic system, sadly, that we have today. We don't have something that produces these outcomes. So how do we shift toward that? And indeed, what does it actually look like? Which is a very neat segue to say, about 12 months ago, we launched a fun little side project that I would love you all to go and have a go at after I've talked to you, which is called Vision 2070. And Vision 2070 came about. I was invited down to Brazil about 18 months ago to talk at a big sustainability conference there in the city of Vitoria in the state of Espírito Santo, which is just sort of north of Rio and Sao Paulo. And I was asked, the brief I was given for speaking, along with a few other sort of thought leaders and futurists, was to give my vision of the future, and specifically the date 2070 was chosen. And I realized that despite having worked in the sector for well over a decade, I didn't have a very good vision. I could talk in very theoretical terms. I could talk in very scientific terms. I could talk about planetary boundaries. I could talk about social foundations, and I could talk about the need to sit within all of these boundaries. But bluntly, it was a very boring vision of the future. And I realized that I didn't have a compelling picture that I could give people of what was this flourishing, abundant, joyous future that I wanted to help create. So to quote a song, which I think many of us on this call are probably old enough to remember, I sat right down and wrote myself a letter. Or specifically, I wrote myself a letter from the future. And I decided that I would present this at the conference. So when I was asked the question, what's your vision from the future, Martin? Rather than just sit there and rattle off, which is what several of the other presenters did, I announced what's quite funny. I got a letter this morning from my future self telling me about what life is like in the future. And I'd like to read you that letter. Now, I'm not going to read that to you today. It would take a little bit too long, but that is on the Vision 2070 website. So if you fancy having a look at that, and I'll give you the link to that right here. But the idea within that letter was of a future within which life in some ways looked fairly similar to what we do now. But I was writing it from my Pedro pod, my personalized electric drone pod that was flying me from my home where I live now in Hertfordshire down into central London, where it was going to drop me off the blades of this pod. We're going to drop me down onto some wheels, and those wheels were going to drive my pod, basically my chair, a little booth like this, into the center of town where I was going to meet my friends. We were going to meet in a food mall, which was filled with precision fermentation foods, vertical farming, food from all around the world, but that had been made in the most sustainable manner. I was excited because they just released a flavor map for one of my favorite red wines, actually from the mid 1960s. And that the engineers had been mapping this. They now had the flavor and the license to produce it. So they were able to literally produce this on tap as though we had a bottle of this basically now unavailable exquisite wine. After spending some time with them, I was going to go down to one of the electronic lounges where I was going to sit in my fully immersed haptic suit and join some friends of mine who were actually diving in real life off the Great Barrier Reef. But we would join them in real time, diving with them. And this was going to be an amazing shared experience. And the only slightly unusual thing was, of course, real life fish can't see the virtual version of you. So it's slightly strange when a shark could actually swim through you in your suit. And then after that, we would be getting together with some more friends. And then eventually I'd be heading home because we were about to celebrate with the whole of the globe, the fact that we'd passed back under the 1.5 degree warming target. and that this had been something that the whole world had started to work towards. And the biggest celebration was actually that personal carbon targets were being removed. And these were something that had been in place for 20 to 30 years, but had actually now just fallen into disuse because they were no longer needed. When they'd first been introduced, there'd been uproar, there'd been trading, people had been so annoyed by these things. But actually, with the evolution of renewable energy in abundance around the world, and with the developments of technology and AI and everything else, actually these targets were no longer needed. Nobody cared about them. We could get rid of them, and yet we still were now heading back down below 1.5 degrees. And this was a great thing to be celebrated alongside the 25th anniversary of no wars in the world. Now, you might sort of say that that's, there's elements of wishful thinking within that. And yes, of course, there are. But at the same time, as I was writing this, I was actually quite struck by the fact that my own vision in some ways was actually limited as an extension of what I know today. And we carried on in the group having a really fascinating conversation about how do we stretch our own minds, particularly now with the growth of AI and all of this stuff, to the unknown unknowns. What is it that the future is actually going to unlock that isn't just an extension of my imagination today, but actually is a whole new set of worlds of things that could emerge that, I'm not even wired to think about at the moment. Now, the reason for telling you all about this, hopefully it's a bit of a fun and slightly different way to start this conversation, but I want to challenge all of you today to, do you know what your vision is for 2070? Whether or not you think you'll be alive by then, but for your children or your grandchildren or whatever, your friends, what is the world that they you would like them to be living in? And if you would spare us a couple of minutes, I would really encourage you to go to vision2070.org, where you can capture your personal vision. You can type it in. If you just want to speak, there's a little AI bot on there. So you can speak to the bot for a minute. It will capture what you say, process it. It will produce you a picture, and it will plop that up on the onto this shared repository. So we've got well over 100 plus visions in there at the moment, many more in the pipeline that are coming from around the world. And we just want to create this wonderful open source picture of a positive future. And goodness knows that we all need those positive visions right now. It's totally free. You just need to create a little login. And don't worry, we won't email you or anything. It's just that we've got a little bit of a gatekeeper there. And please share your vision with us. That would be wonderful. But if we are talking about creating this wonderful, abundant, flourishing future, then actually I think it's becoming, incumbent, on all of us to really have that picture that we can share with people, that we can motivate people, that we can excite people, that actually it's not all doom and gloom, or it doesn't have to be just doom and gloom. It's not all about polar bears floating on a tiny little ice cube in a blistered future. That's the future we don't want. So what is the future that we do want? What is that positive, truly sustainable, regenerative future? I'm sure you've all got ideas. I'm sure you've all got visions. There's no right and wrong on this. It's all about collating those ideas. So please do share those with us, because it would be fantastic to know what you think. And as we talk afterwards, I'd love if you want to share some of those with us. So coming out of the ethereal and the vision down into our framework, as I said, I'm not going to spend any time on where we are today in terms of the problems we're all facing. I'm sure you are all entirely aware of this, but I just want to ground this from the sense of this is where the future fit system science-based approach comes from. What we're looking at is a world, as we know, of exponential growth in every way, shape, and form. And you're all engineers, you will all understand that it is simply mathematically impossible to have continuous exponential growth within a finite system. At some point, you break through the boundaries of that finite system, at which point things start to go somewhat catastrophically wrong. Now, I just will address one issue for a second. I am not anti-growth. I'm not degrowth. I don't like putting myself in any of those buckets. I'm all about growth. I'm all about the right type of growth. I'm all about growth in regenerating the environment. I'm all about growth in social flourishing. What I'm not necessarily all about is continued growth in GDP, simply because that's giving us the wrong metric, it's giving us the wrong incentive, it's giving us the wrong outcome, ultimately. So Future Fit was created to try and say, how do we help business and indeed any organization to respond to these issues? The fact that we are bursting through all of the planetary boundaries, we've already breached 7 of the 9 that we know of, and we are rapidly and regularly breaching all of the social foundations upon which we need to exist to be able to flourish as human beings. So how do we respond meaningfully to those issues? Well, firstly, we believe that we need to move from this concept of shareholder value, where business has historically been externalizing the impacts on planet and society and internalizing the gains, which, by the way, was always going to lead us to the point we're at today. This sounded like a great model in the 1950s. It still looked all right in the 70s and 80s. By the 2000s and beyond, we really should have been responding far more quickly to the fact we were only ever going to get to a point of greater and greater wealth being concentrated in fewer and fewer hands, and more and more and more harm being pushed out onto planet and society. Again, I'm an ex-banker. I'm certainly not anti-business. I'm about how do we do business in the right way. Now, in the 2000s and the 2010s, this concept of shared value came along, where we started to overlap these 3 circles somewhat. We sort of created this Venn diagram where we said the overlapping pieces. Well, this is good. This is where business is providing value to planet and society. And in some way, shape, or form, that can offset the harm. Well, yeah, okay, that's a step in the right direction. But again, this is a very unsatisfactory model. How can we justify positivity in one area, offsetting harm in another? If I plant a whole load of trees in Hertfordshire, where I live, but I cut down an equal number of trees in the rainforest, is that the same? Is that an equal and offsetting benefit? Well, clearly not, because the ecosystem is different, the biodiversity is different, the impact on the local community will be different. Pretty much the only thing that you can reasonably offset is a kilo of carbon. Everything else, it doesn't work that way. So this model is better, arguably, but it's extremely unsatisfying. Where we believe we need to get to is this concept of system value, where for business to flourish, it needs to be sat within the boundaries of a flourishing society, and for society to flourish, it needs to be sat within the boundaries of a flourishing planet. So clearly, we need to be operating in ways that are not only not reaching those boundaries and are on the outside of them, but need to be pulled back inside and actually be regenerative in everything that we're doing. So the Future Fit methodology is all about how do you create an organization that is creating genuine systemic value. So what we did was take the system science that defines the social and planetary boundary conditions. We actually built on a framework called the natural step, which I know a couple of you on this call are familiar with. And we took their framing. That's an incredible piece of science, but it is very dense. It's a very academic piece of work, and it's quite difficult for your average chief executive to pick up. She might well be able to sort of read and understand the document, but how can she then actually translate it into what does that mean for her organization? So we wanted to take sort of all of that groundwork, work with people around the world, and we put together an amazing group of experts from academia, from business, from investments, from consultancy, from government, you name it, experts on individual issues, experts on system thinking. And we said, how do we translate all of these principles into steps, into a framework, into a methodology that companies can say, okay, I trust the translation work that's been done here. Now, how do I put this into action in my organization? So to start with, we came up with this set of 8, what we call our properties for regenerative business. You can read all of those on the screen. I won't repeat them. And there are 7 main properties. underlain by this eighth property, that social norms, global governance, and what we define as economic growth drive the pursuit of these other pieces. Again, that goes back to the point that with GDP, the economic growth definition doesn't seek these other seven things. It simply seeks to maximize that one measurement of economic throughput. So guess what? We don't actually see these other seven things arising as a consequence of the system. It's either an accidental outcome or it's something that people are deliberately and separately targeting, usually at a cost to themselves. So we need to redesign the entire system to operate in a way where these are the desired outcomes. And quite frankly, why shouldn't they be? We surely want people to have the capacity to live fulfilling lives. We surely want to see an environment and a planet that is flourishing. So we need to create business that works in a way that it generates these outcomes while serving the needs of everybody. And ultimately, business being in the service of humanity and the planet, rather than planet and humanity being in the service of business. So from these eight properties, we said, okay, now we need to think about the world through a 2x2. Clearly, we had some management consultants in the background there. And so to start with, we think about the direct negative impact that businesses are creating. And clearly, if we're going to get back within these boundary conditions, then every business must ultimately identify and eliminate the entire negative impact that is occurring because of its existence. Not an easy step, I grant you, but a critical one nonetheless. And what we ultimately did was break down those eight properties, as you can see in the central column here, into what became 23 goals, break-even goals, as we call them. Break-even from the perspective of this is where you've got to get to be on that line where you are no longer causing any harm. Each of these goals is written in very simple language to start with. You don't need a PhD to understand at least the principles behind any of these goals. And we believe that this is a complete and coherent set of goals that collectively define those barriers and those break-even points. If you can spot any today, or when you go and read the methodology, if you can see anything you think we've missed, fantastic. Huge points to you for being the first person to spot what we've not got in there. And of course, being an open source system, the whole point is we can keep evolving and developing this system so that if there are things that we've missed or things that need changing, we can keep evolving and moving forward with them. Behind each of these goals, we've got 25 to 30 pages of detail, all available online, where you can really dig into understanding what do we mean by these goals, what is the responsibility of the company, what's outside of the responsibility of the company. And importantly, how do you measure your progress? And each of these goals can be measured on a 0 to 100% scale. 0 being that you're not doing any of it, 100% means you are fully at that break-even point. So, for example, with energy from renewable sources, it's pretty obvious how that scale would work. On some of the other goals, it's a little bit more based around how you're putting procedures and operations into practice within the organization. But every one of these has a goal that you can measure. So ultimately, you can start to score and move yourself forward over time towards that end goal of ultimately, if you are causing no harm, you're able to say yes to every single one of these. I am doing that, and that ultimately my organization isn't causing any harm to planet or society. Now, of course, we are operating in a system that is not wired to achieve this. So we are talking here about massive systemic change. We are talking about a long-term journey to get to this point. I don't think there's a single organization in the world today that could say yes to every single one of these. Their impacts might be pretty small, but it's almost impossible to be living in the real world and to say yes to every one of these. But obviously, this isn't about one company doing it in isolation. It's about all of us moving towards a destination, whereas a society, all of our organizations can ultimately say yes to all of these things. And then we know that we've got a socio-economic system that is working in service of everybody and is not causing any harm in pursuit of that. These goals are also mapped to all of the SDGs, the UN SDGs, at the target level. So if your organization or your personal interest is related to the SDGs, then you can see exactly how we've mapped out each of these. We've got a little tool on our website that shows how all of those map. Now, I've talked about the do no harm side of things. I also want to talk about the positive side of things. How is it that you could be regenerative and positive in your actions as an organization? And of course, there are 3 squares left here. So there are 3 things to think about. 1, how can you go beyond break even and create positive impact yourself? How can you help to reduce the negative impact of others through what you're doing? And then in the top right corner, how do you amplify the positive impacts of others? I often think of this as being, if I, as a business, am doing all I can to eliminate my negatives and create as much positive impact as possible. And Elisa is stood next to me doing the same with her business. It's kind of like the right-hand side of this is like us holding hands and saying, how can we work together to reduce each other's negatives and amplify the positives of what each of us are doing? And of course, if every business within a sector or within a cluster is able to do that type of thing, then clearly we can start to see magnifying impacts of what we are achieving. Similarly to the break-even goals, we then have our positive pursuits. This is a set of 24, always slightly annoys me. It ended up being 23 break-even goals, 24 positive pursuits. The number doesn't really matter. The point is, these are all of the ways in which an organization could be delivering its purpose and its products and services to speed up society's progress towards this idea of a future fit society. We have the same properties down the middle, and then we have this corresponding set of things that an organization could be doing. Now, these are categories, not actions. We can't possibly list every individual thing that any organization could do. But the idea of the categories is to help bring to focus for organizations, what is it that you're actually knowledgeable about and best able to do? And how do you talk about that in a coherent manner to your external stakeholders? And obviously, whereas you should be trying to do in time all of the things on the break-even list, it's probably fairly unlikely that you're going to be trying to do all of the things on the positive pursuit list. This is about where are you most able to bring value through what you are doing. You might be a specialist in energy. You might be a specialist in waste. You're probably not a specialist in multiple different areas of this. And that's absolutely okay. That's not the point. The point is, where are you most able to draw out your positive impacts, your regenerative behaviors, and how can you ultimately do that in a way where you are reducing and ultimately eliminating all of the negative impacts that are associated with the way you used to be doing your business? And what does that transformation journey look like for your organization? To summarize all of that in a single chart, if we think about it in the sense of a lever or a seesaw, we're trying to lift society from where it is today. We're trying to push down on that lever and pivot us up to this vision of a flourishing, future fit society. Now, of course, this graphic isn't actually entirely correct because it implies that there is a firm foundation under society today. If only that were the case. Sadly, as we all know, it isn't. And actually, if you push too hard on the wrong side of that lever, things are going to just keep getting worse. And that's one of the big problems with so much of today's best practice in industry. All best practice is doing is being slightly less bad. It's moving closer to that pivot point, but it's still pressing on the wrong side of the lever. It's still forcing society and the planet in the wrong direction. And this is one of the big challenges we all have, right? That list of future fit break-even goals that I put up a minute ago, you're probably looking through that and going, well, yeah, that kind of makes sense. I get that. They're really quite hard to achieve, and they are. And the challenging news for us all is even if a business was able to say that, and as we said, almost none are, even then they're only pushing on the pivot point. They're only not making things worse. Now, that's a great step forward, but they're not in and of themselves at that point making things better. Clearly, what we then need to be doing is also pulling on the other side of this lever. What is it that we are doing through our services, through our products, and the way we deliver them to cancel out or reverse the negative impacts of the past? Or even better, what can we do to address the root causes? How can we have greater systemic influence? And of course, this was a nice summary of the work that Donella Meadows did and many others around her. And this is a gross simplification of that. But I know as systems engineers, you'll all get the concept here of ultimately the further along that lever that you can pull or push, the easier it's going to be to shift the system in the right direction. So ultimately, as an organization, as a business, where can you have the greatest influence across the system? So not only in what you are doing, but actually in how you influence all those upstream and downstream of your organization. Now, before we came onto this call, Hamza and his colleagues had previously sent me this mapping of the Sustain Us on Flourishing business model, which I'm really hoping resonates with folks here. I don't know, this might not be the most up-to-date version, but I just wanted to drop this in and sort of say, in light therefore of where you're thinking in terms of this model, where does the future fit toolkit fit in to the flow through this? And I think it sits here within the bit I've just ringed on the diagrams, the mission, the vision, the design for sustainable behavior, and ultimately then the business and operating processes within an organization. But it probably sits at the level above product development and all of those pieces. Absolutely, each and every one of those steps should be thinking about how does it do things in a future fit way? How does it do things in a manner that adheres to the break-even goals and the positive pursuits? But I think it sits very comfortably at that top level. And as I go into a couple of case studies now, I think, hopefully that will become a little bit clearer. But I just wanted to try and root what I was talking into what I've understood is the dialogue that you've all been having. I'm conscious that I've just thrown a huge amount of information at you. I'm going to go into some case studies, but I just want to pause for a second and just see if there are any hands up, if there are any questions, thoughts, responses, or challenges. I know we've got plenty of time for Q&A at the end. Often when I ask this at this point, there's stunned silence, which I hope is just people are processing what I've said. I'm not. Oh, Lou, there we go. Offer a hand usually comes up. Lou, please.
Yeah, it goes
Yes,
on.
I really like this particular slide because in the presentation I gave, that was one of the conclusions I came is that you can't expect a product development sustainability unless sustainability is part of the DNA of the organization creating those products. And so that starts at the enterprise level, their mission, their vision, your business operating procedures, and that all has to be built in. And then we talk about
Right.
requirements not only on the product, but requirements on the people developing the product. So every life cycle stage, there needs to be what I call design controls that are requirements on the people developing the product that they need to keep sustainability in mind when they're picking the design, the architecture, the parts, the supply chain. That all has to be written into the company's procedures, their work instructions, or it's not going to happen. So I
Right.
really like this.
Great. Thank you for that. Yeah. Casey.
Hi, Martin. Great that you're here. I'm really happy that it worked out. And I see the slide because that's where we were stuck, right, Hamza? So I was the one who was trying because I know about your tool for quite a while because I've been working with Anthony as well. But to be honest, and I'm going to throw this out with all that it entails, even if I look funny. So I was trying to do your vision things. I didn't hear if you said it, so I'm sorry if you said it before. But what do I find about the profitability in the break-even goals or before? Is it because I love it, obviously, because it takes us to the regenerative side, but we all know how hard it is to remain profitable doing all this. So
Yeah.
how is this handled in your framework if you have 2 or 3 pointers before going to the case studies where we will, I hope, learn more about it?
Now, great question. So we took something of a deliberate decision when we first created the benchmark, which was to say that when it came to understanding the concept of financial break-even or not, there wasn't really anything we felt we could add to the dialogue that was not already well understood by senior management. So we took an approach to say what isn't understood is the concept of what does sustainable break-even look like, and hence created all of the tools with which I've just talked and you're familiar. So when we're discussing with businesses, or when our consultants, our accredited advisors around the world are doing them, it is of course always said with the caveat that this has to be done in a way that is helping to keep the business in a profitable state and transform them, hopefully, ultimately, to a far more profitable state. Now, when you look through our open source methodology, because all of the detail that I've talked about here is on our website, and fully available for you to go and read right now. And I should add, it's now available not only in English, but in Spanish, Portuguese, and Chinese, with French and German on the way, courtesy of our friends at AI. We don't talk about the profitability. And I think it's fair to say that probably that it was I think our decision was correct, but it was a bit of an oversight not to have talked about that more. And as we are evolving the methodology in the future, I think we will make sure that we talk about that, so that people don't just think we've forgotten about it, or that we weren't interested in it, because it is the reality of where we are. And of course, it also comes down to the big challenge of one of the reasons that the 3 circles model that I put up earlier, and starting from the shareholder value model, one of the challenges is that model is at its heart cheaper, because you are externalizing cost and impact to people who, as far as you're concerned, are not on your balance sheet. So there is a real challenge to doing these things in a way where you start to internalize those costs, because if you internalize those costs, you've got to find ways of doing it that are ultimately generating a financial benefit that offsets that cost, so you can keep moving forward. And that is super, super challenging. So that's an area where we've had a lot of thought. Again, sadly, unfortunately, and with apologies, you won't find much of that written at the moment, but that is very much something that we want to do as we sort of keep developing the methodology going forward. But brilliant question. Thank you. Peter. Oh, you're on mute, my friend. Peter, sorry, you're on mute.
Peter, you're on mute. You have to start again.
I'm just apologizing because I said up front I wouldn't spend more than 40 minutes. I'm due elsewhere quite soon. We must
No
talk.
Great.
I'm really, really interested in your work. I think it's marvelous. I think there's another way as well. It's complementary. It's not, but it's and. And that's looking at the whole world level and treating it as a system of sustainable communities, and then
Yes.
deriving a set of universal principles for sustainment, which we have, and then building them into a model for what these things need to have. It creates limit conditions for the sort of thing you're talking about. And it's possible to do that structurally. We have methods.
I would
I
love
think
to
we're in
talk
that
more on
space.
that.
If you have, you've stolen my thunder. But if not, we can have a really good chat.
I think, I mean, I am talking at the business level here, and we
You
are
are.
very much,
Yeah.
we are very much conscious that this absolutely tears
And you've
all
got
the
to
way
do
up.
that.
But I would still love to. That's an English accent. Are you based in the UK?
Well, I'm based in Malvern in Worcestershire, famous for the old radar lab, but I become a systems person, and I'm
Okay.
quite active in the Royal Academy of Engineering, which is I'm writing a paper for, but I want to get the view of this team before I submit it. So I'm in
Fantastic.
that sort of space.
Well, please do reach out. You can find me very easily on LinkedIn, or Hamza can share my
I will do.
email.
And if I
Let's
don't
talk.
see that Hamza's team in the near future is going to finish this damn paper. I'm not very good at completing, but the idea is I can do a brief anytime. I'd love to.
Wonderful.
Thank you very much. I've got to leave you, folks, and thanks everybody. Thanks for the great opportunity of meeting this. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter. John.
Thanks for the lovely presentation, Martin. Really enjoyed it. Maybe this is sort of the elephant in the room, but we live in this sort of capitalist society and world. That's just the way it works. And return on capital sort of drives everything. And GDP growth is essentially that return on capital, which is being shown to be making people very unhappy as well as destroying the planet. So I believe there's a great opportunity. I mean, for first time in history, we can all be fed, we can be housed, we can have medical care. I mean, it's really, truly possible for probably the first time in history. Yet, we've got to change fundamentally. If you look at, Meadows' sort of hierarchy of leverage points, sort of near the top. So how do we move from measuring GDP to just measuring one of the UN metrics, or there's lots of different sort of metrics that measure a balanced scorecard of society. I mean, if we actually used a balanced scorecard for measurement and we held politicians and others to it, the world would be a different place. But the question is, how do we get from where we are today to that point?
Well, you'll be delighted to know I've got a 3-point plan that is absolutely 100% guaranteed to get us there, John.
Yes.
Yeah. Oh man. Look, I mean, you've absolutely put your finger right on the heart of the problem, and it is very much where we are pivoting as Future Fit to be really, really laser focused in on that question, because I think, look, the fundamental shifts that we've seen in the world in the last 18 months, yes, heralded by one certain individual, but ultimately, he is just a figurehead of a much broader movement. The challenge that we have, I think, isn't that we don't know where to go, we don't know what to do, and all the rest of it. We do. We don't, maybe not down to the tiniest details, right? But all of the models, of which Future Fit is just one, and all of the other stuff, we know what we need to do. We don't need AI to tell us how to solve climate change, right? Stop burning fossil fuels. There we go. Solve climate change. How do we socially and politically move to that point? And sadly, I don't have a 3-point plan with the answer. I'm afraid I lied. What it comes down to for me now is we have to do perhaps 2 major things. One is we need to develop a cohesive narrative to bring people on the journey with us. And I think the sustainability world has not been actually very good at conveying that message of what a positive, flourishing, abundant future could look like for people. It's either sort of all doom and gloom, we're all going to die, which is possibly true, but not very motivating. And on the other hand, it's a bit too, happy clappy. We're not, it doesn't feel very realistic. So how do we create a vision for people that says that they can look at and go, you know what? I hate my job. I hate the fact that I'm grinding every day to feed my kids, to take the next step on the treadmill. I feel trapped. I'm not flourishing as an individual. I don't see a great future, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. How do we turn that round? And then that can link to saying, how do we then create examples and test cases, as many of them as we can around the world, where we're at least heading in this direction? How do we multiply by orders of magnitude the positive stories, the positive case studies of cities and towns and businesses that have changed and are flourishing? We've got to get past always talking about Patagonia, always talking about interface, always talking about the same places. Because then we can say to people when they start to go to the polling booth, assuming they're afforded the luxury of being allowed to go to a polling booth without lots of proof of ID, is the person that you're about to put an X next to their name, is that person giving you the pathway to the future? To take, to take a UK example, is Nigel Farage, the leader of Reform, is he going to create in the UK this picture that I've got in my head of the flourishing future? And if not him, and I personally don't believe he would, who of the other people on that piece of paper are going to get me there? How do I lobby them before we even get to that place to say, if you have policies and processes that are going to take me in this direction, then I'm going to vote for you and I'm going to hold your feet to the fire to deliver that. That's a very short answer to a very big question, but that is broadly where I think we need to go, John, to start getting more and more people on board. And ultimately, whether we like it or not, we are all a political movement, even if we don't want to be politicians.
So thanks for that explanation. I know that there are simple solutions to every complex problem, and they're all wrong. So let me sort of propose a 3-point plan. Sort of works within the existing social and economic system we have. So the first one is, how do we change the investment behavior of individuals? Right. Because companies do move with that. If during our president's first term, he tried to create these sort of business committees, if you recall, and they fell apart quite quickly. And the reason they fell apart quite quickly is because people were boycotting the people who were actually attending these. And so it was not politically favorable. So I don't believe we can count on our government to do anything. As you can imagine, being someone in the country I live, why I might have that position. But the economic system is there. So if we can get a way to actually put objective measures on companies with respect to their impact, enough of the investment community will basically change behavior. So I agree. The objective of the CEO is not to make the most money, it's to create the most shareholder value. So we may actually decrease the earnings, but the PE ratios could be positively affected. And so we could actually affect companies that way. Mm-hmm. From a consumer's perspective, can we create the means by which consumers can understand objectively what the impact is of their consuming decisions and so on and so forth? And so how do we do that, and how do we build communities? And then finally, for systems people, how do we create the tools so that you can understand the impact of your decision? So for example, if you're a mechanical engineer, electrical engineer, and you're creating products, usually they tell you it has to cost this much or less, or it's not a product. Well, if you're a software person, they don't tell you anything. You just want more data and you want more this and more that. What if we had tools that, as we created software, we could actually see what the impact was with respect to computational efficiency and footprint to sort of say, hey, more data is actually not a good idea. We actually want less data here. We can show that the cost benefits move us in that direction. So I guess I'm looking at, I don't believe that we're going to change the economic system, and I have no faith in the political system. So sort of looking at the different tiers in which we can work within the economic system to get enough people to move in a direction that we can affect change. So those are my three, and I'll get off the soapbox. Thank you, Martin.
John, I love it. And just to wrap this up, I mean, what I would say is I completely concur with that. I think the way we've designed Future Fit is very much intended to help create those types of tools. So it is not in itself a tool for measuring in the way that you described, but I think we can it helps set the boundaries and the targets within which that can be done. I think the communities piece is absolutely right, and I think that talks to the vision piece I was just mentioning. And funnily enough, you mentioned finance. As I said, I come from finance. I really started Future Fit to shift the finance industry. One of the projects that we are kickstarting in anger very shortly and before the end of the year, might be able to come back and tell you all about, is we're actually looking to create genuine impact place-based finance benchmarks. So how could you create an ETF for a retail investor that is place-based, so country-based to start with would be the level of granularity, but where you know that the companies in that index are creating the most positive and regenerative impact in that country as defined by the citizens of that country, obviously within the system boundaries that we need to and the thresholds we need to respect. I think that would be incredibly popular. I think that, I mean, if we can do that in America, I think there would be Democrats and Republicans who would buy that, assuming it financially performed, of course, because I think there you're transcending those types of boundaries. It's all about how do we get flourishing and regeneration, using the right words, in your country. Why would people not like that? We're going to create that methodology. There's a partnership we're forming. We're going to use FutureFit. We're going to use donut economic thinking. The science will be pretty strong. We will use AI to do the data analysis. The question will be whether, A, is there enough data to give us a meaningful output? And if there is, and we can create those indices, how do they perform financially? Because, you know, no, Vanguard are not going to launch an ETF even if it's the most wonderfully impactful, if it's, you know, at minus 10% per annum return. So time will tell when we've done the work on that. But I love your 3 steps, and yeah, I think we're trying to touch on all of them. So let's keep in contact. Brilliant. Okay, now I think in the interest of time, maybe I should just bounce on. Thank you so much for those questions. Really great to interact. I just want to touch on a couple of case studies, and then I'll round off by just talking about how what our community is and how you can be involved with it. I'm going to start with what was a German company, Wiesmann, and specifically a subgroup called Wiesmann Climate Solutions. This is a 14 billion euro company with something like similar 14,000 employees, big organization. They make HVACs and that type of heat pumps, air conditioning, all of that. This is their sustainability report from 2023. I can happily send anybody a copy. It's available on the internet. It is, I think, the best corporate strategy paper that I've pretty much ever read, and I have read a lot of these, as I'm sure many of you have, and seen some complete tripe. This is brilliant. I am slightly biased. It is all built using FutureFit, but the team who put this together did the most incredible job, including in motivating and working with the engineers and those down at product level. Doug, you'll probably quite like this anecdote. They went to talk to some of the engineers who designed these big units. So imagine something the size of a big fridge freezer, something like probably the sort of the box I'm currently sat in here. And they took one of these off the end of the production line. They sat it in a room. They got the designers, the engineers in. They gave them you know, screwdrivers and wrenches and stuff, and said, right, take it apart. Think about how could you fix the various pieces, how could you replace the various pieces, and how could we get all of the parts and recycle this at the end of the life. So of course, you know, roll forward a few hours. You've got lots of bloody knuckles, German swearing, pieces that wouldn't come apart, pieces that couldn't be accessed, things that were glued together, multi-composite pieces. In other words, these engineers had only ever designed from one perspective, which was how do we put this thing together? They'd never actually been tasked with the job of how would you repair it? How would you think about recycling it? And as simple a task as giving them one and a set of screwdrivers and saying, okay, take it apart, was transformational for these individuals. And I just love that as you can just imagine these light bulbs flickering on all around the room in that afternoon of, as I say, you know, much sort of shedded skin and swearing. And I thought it was a great little anecdote of how they started to get all of the various product groups and different people together to think about how they actually could redesign and differently design the products. I haven't got time to go in great detail through all of the report's about 130 pages long. This is an example of how they did their sustainability materiality assessment. So from the most to the least important issues across net zero, circularity, zero harm and people, that was how they ultimately created their pillars of interest. But here was both the inside out and the outside in materiality assessment. Where is there the most risk to the business and the risk to society? So, oddly enough, for these guys, product greenhouse gases was actually the single most important thing that they needed to focus on. And the report talks about how they created this sort of vision and strategy house from the purpose of the organization, the three key focus areas that they wanted to have moving forward, the vision for each of those columns, and then very clear targets for 2050 and 2030. Very clear, measurable targets. And underneath all of that, who are the enablers and what are the enablers to enable that to be delivered? It's a beautiful report. I think it was a fantastic piece of work. And it was fantastic to see it sort of coming together. Whilst the validity of that work, I think, remains unchecked, unfortunately, the story doesn't have a wonderfully happy ending. With advance apologies to our American viewers, it was a privately held company in Germany, fourth generation family business. And the son, Max Wiesmann, ultimately sold the organization to a Florida listed company called Carrier. I'm sure many of you will be familiar with that brand. My understanding is that when Carrier first bought Wiesmann Climate Solutions, they said, "Oh, we love the sustainability stuff. Yeah, we really want to integrate that, and this would be great. We can sort of reverse engineer that into the whole of Carrier." And we were all very excited because we thought, wow, this is great. We're going to have a Florida listed US based company doing this. Wow, that's going to be absolutely incredible. Unfortunately, 2 and a bit years later, it hasn't really worked out that way. As far as I'm aware, it hasn't particularly been integrated into the broader organization. Things have been watered down. I'm sure it's very tough if you're Florida based in the current environment, trying to do things like this and put your head above the parapet. But ultimately, the team who created this have left the combined business and are either working in the German entity or have gone off to do other things. So sadly, you can have a brilliant strategy, but then, there can be a corporate decision that can take you in a different direction. There's an interesting, lesson within that. But all of that aside, I still think this is an absolutely brilliant guidance document for saying how can other businesses create something like this and hopefully then actually take it forward to delivery at the next level. I'm just going to check my time. I've got a little bit more time. I have 2 or 3 more examples. This is a listed business down in New Zealand. So they're in the New Zealand 50. Top 50 listed companies. It's a group called Tourism Holdings Limited. They rent RVs. So if you are touring in Australia or New Zealand or America or the UK, and you're hiring a mid-sized RV to tour around, then THL is the holding company behind a lot of brands which would be familiar with you. So not quite the size of a sort of a Winnebago, but a little bit below that sort of level. But basically, this is about driving vast distances in beautiful countries to see amazing landscapes. And what I love about this organization is they were one of the first to really embrace the concept of future fitness. And I remember the chief exec, Grant Webster, saying to me a couple of years into the journey, we no longer talk about being future fit, Martin. And I was like, uh-oh, is he about to tell me then they're not using the framework? He said, we just act in a way that is future fit. And I just love that subtle shift of it was no longer something that they brought in. It wasn't, something that they carried into the business in a suitcase and put in the corner. It became the way they did and do business. And it is now just, it's in the DNA of the organization. And that for me is a really powerful sign. They, for many years, have produced their Future Fit health check, and there's a little copy of it in the bottom right hand corner there, where you can see how the traffic lights are changing over time from how they're addressing the priorities of all of these different issues and how they are making progress, or sometimes they hit setbacks. They went through the COVID era and have bounced out the other side of that. So it's been an incredible journey. Again, highly recommend if you're interested, go and take a look at their integrated annual reports, and you'll see how this has progressed over time. Another New Zealand example. We're quite big in New Zealand, and this is from a gentleman called Roger Robson Williams. He was Chief Sustainability Officer at one of the government-based Crown Research Institutes called Plant and Food Research. It sort of does what it says on the tin. There were 7 of these entities. They've actually now just been brought into 3, condensed down to 3 organizations. And actually the main one that Plant and Food was part of is now rolling out Future Fit across all 4 of those research institutes that have come together to be the one. But what's great with this is it's a really good example of how they've been doing it within their own organization. So they're walking the walk. But because they're at the center of an ecosystem, they've been able to start influencing out to others within the food and ag research areas, to the organizations producing. So, for example, kiwi fruit, one of the main things they do is create new strains of kiwi fruit. The main entity that then grows and exports the kiwis, a company called Zespri, they took on board the methodology. Then there was another group, a tech group of agencies, nothing to do with plant and food, all about tech. That group learned about what this cluster was doing. So that cluster started to adopt. So it's a wonderful example of sort of seeing how when one group starts to do it, it's not only got its own group of organizations it can reach out to, but that systemic effect of reaching out to others. So New Zealand is one of the main places for, we roll out around the world by creating what we call local chapters. So this is loose alliances of organizations and individuals in any country that are using Future Fit, drawing them together, integrating them with the other sustainability networks and organizations that exist, and just trying to grow awareness of this tool for use across the whole of that country. So we have a local chapter in New Zealand, one in Australia, Adriana. We have Japan, China, Hong Kong, Malaysia, Singapore, Iberia, so northern Spain, and Portugal. We're talking to a couple of Scandinavian countries at the moment about launching there, so Denmark, Norway, Sweden, and Canada. Hopefully we will also be launching very soon. So if you're in one of those countries and you would like me to connect you to our folks there, please reach out. If you're in one of those countries and I haven't mentioned you, and would like to think about how we could start to kickstart a Future Fit local chapter in your country, then I would love to have that conversation. And everybody loves to have a slide full of logos of organizations around the world who are using the framework. So here is ours. And as I bring you into land, 2 final things to say. One is we have our tools and resources all available online for free. We have what we call our Changemaker community. This is where we do monthly webinars. It's where we have all of our tools and everything. It's free to join. The URL is across the bottom of the screen there. Or if you are a QR code user, just click on that. I'll circulate these slides via Hamza, so you can find that. Please do join. We'd love to have you in there. And finally, if I may, just a little plug for our accredited advisor program. We are not a consultancy. We don't do consulting, but rather we train accredited advisors around the world. So we have a program that you go through to learn our methodology, learn our tools, go through a training program, which is a combination of video training and self-learning. And then there's a test at the end of it, quite a hard test. But when you've passed that test, you get the accredited advisor badge, and you can add that alongside your B Corp badge or whatever else you've got to be able to help organizations on the journey. we have numerous organizations and individuals around the world who are part of this program. So if you would like to learn more about FutureFit, you would like to be using it in a more professional way, as I've said, it's all open source and available to you. But if you would like to really understand how to use it well, then again, please reach out to Elisa and I, and we'd love to tell you more about the program. And with that, I will land the Pedro pod. Renewably charged, of course. There's my email and our website. Please feel free to reach out. But I think we've got a little bit of time left, Hamza. So let's carry on the conversation.
Cool. Thank you very much for the presentation. That was a very great one. And I think as you have heard, we will definitely have some collaboration points coming up. The work from Lou, I think there we can integrate the FutureFit goals that you have presented. And I think also on what John has been talking about. So it's good that this session is recorded. So I think there were like many good strategies that we'll be coming back to and looking how to bring them into solutions. Yeah, so everyone, who has some question? I see already a hand from Kai.
Sure. Hi, thank you so much, Martin. After all this time, I've been a community member for a long time too. And I couldn't actually sign into your vision, so I talked with Elisa about it. Otherwise, I would have loved to leave a vision as well. So thank you very much. Following on a little bit on what you discussed with John as well, and maybe Mike you can ask your own question as well about the background of your work, maybe. But Mike, I wanted to make a comment and maybe offer or ask more about this, because I've been running with a group called Digital Gaia at some point. They're an AI. They were looking to do agent-to-agent place-based models for world modeling, I guess, with active inference-based AI, which is highly more sustainable. Number one, number two, number three. And I was wondering whether it would be interesting with what you were looking at, whether there might be a connection for what you do, because they're working sort of bottom up. They've been doing this out of the Gaia consortium with the Buckminster Fuller Institute at some point. They obviously are startups, so they have been going through many motions now. But this will, to really work up from the local level, from a regenerative point of view, with a case study, for instance, with agriculture. I think it was some maybe in the Amazon, so which was a starting point to get at least sort of place-based comparative data, I guess, but bottom up and more granular than what you were saying. And I'm not sure how, but I think that might be also something which we can connect to this open field we had, what would be the fastest, or how could we sort of leverage all these, and where we need to start organize. So any views on that from your side?
I would love to understand that work more. So definitely, perhaps you could connect us all up and let's have another chat. I think that would be really helpful, Kai. Thank you. Yeah, I know, this is always. I think we have to always be saying yes and. So long as the solutions are genuinely about transformative behavior, I think I've reached a point now where, I personally, and therefore FutureFit as an organization, we're done being nice about business as usual, but slightly better. We just don't have time for that game anymore. And so I'm all about working with and alongside organizations who share the vision and the dream of where we're trying to get to. I think that ground up piece is incredibly important. Yes, there needs to be, and there needs to be the role from the top down, the political systems, the policies, and all the rest of it. But as you all as systems engineers will fully comprehend, you cannot shift from this one very complex system to another very complex system by a series of linear steps. And so this is about how do we sort of start spinning up the right plates at the various levels, and doing that from the ground up at a very granular level, ultimately it is about how people's lives are going to be impacted. And I think trying to find the right way to bring them on the journey. The vast majority of people in the world are genuinely worried about getting the meal on the table tomorrow. They are not, we are in the extraordinarily privileged position of sitting on computers, pontificating about the future and worrying greatly about, right? Most people are either out the top and they don't care, or fewer out the top and don't care. And the majority are, out the bottom and don't have the capacity to be able to take the time to think about these things. So we have to find a compelling way to bring them on the journey. I think as somebody mentioned in the chat earlier on about, voting for sort of the big voice and the person who says what they want to hear, right? And we all know how that has happened. So again, I think creating the narrative, but in a way that people feel they own it. So it's not us telling them, and particularly when we look to the global south, they've had enough of white people telling them what to do over a very long period of time. It's how do we help them to own and create the narratives, and then hopefully that starts to create the ground up political movements that we need that will give us some chance of getting there. So yeah, long answer short. Yeah, please connect us, Kai, and let's explore that more. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any other questions?
So Mike, I don't know, maybe you can't come to the mic because Mike is also the president, I think, of the IEEE Planet Positive Initiative. She's on the call, so we're really excited. We have sort of started to collaborate. Perfect. There you are, Mike. Because Mike has a very deep interest in Bob Willard's work, as she can tell you.
I was actually just typing. Thanks. Thank you very much. I was just typing a little note. I sort of zeroed in on your comment that we are privileged. And my comment has always been not only in terms of the wealth we have and the way we live, but also in terms of the knowledge that we have acquired. And so that means that also we have the responsibility to act and the responsibility to educate and take everybody with us.
Yeah.
So it's actually a nursing professional way back when in my youth who told me this. If you know better, you have to act. Even if you think you know better and you're wrong, doesn't matter. But who will speak up? Who will speak up?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
It can only be those who believe they are, have more knowledge or best practices or whatever they've got. But who else will? Right? And because we have that privilege, we need to act. So I put that sort of on the top of so my responsibilities. And I've been wrong many times.
That's I love that. I completely concur with that. And look, I would love us again off the back of this, Mike, to talk. It'd be great to sort of see are there ways that we could that FutureFit and IEEE could collaborate in some way or.
So what I'm looking at right now, I'm working with a few colleagues on trying to put together a little bit of an accountability framework. But that means like a 360, like all stakeholders.
Right.
Okay. And it also means a longer timeline. So one of the issues that I find in terms of business and government is that the timelines are too short.
Yes. Oh, yeah.
Right. So if I come from a farm in northern Germany, so people have taken responsibility of the land for hundreds of years, right? Successfully, like maintained the soil and so on and so on,
right.
Because it was always a long-term vision. We maintain it for the future generations.
Yeah.
right? And the current attitude is different in different parts of the world. So some of them are still acting in this very traditional fashion, but a lot of them are saying, "Okay, I'll take what I can get and run, and I don't care about what comes, behind me or what follows."
Yeah.
So that's another attitude shift to take a longer term and looking at the impact, not only of the impact of the stakeholders and the impact of the company, but looking at the 360 impact. And that's, of course, a 360 risk analysis.
Yes. Yeah,
right?
absolutely. Very
And
important.
then measuring and measuring the impact and then changing course as indicated by the results of the analyses, right?
Yeah.
So how do we put this into a language and an ongoing messaging stream that's well understood around the world?
Yes. Yeah.
That's our challenge. I think we all have our vision in our heads, and it's not differing big time. Like there are nuances, and we might have some different tools and so on. But how do we mount this big shift in culture and thinking that will allow us to have a flourishing, healthy biosphere 5,000 years from now? How's that?
Exactly. And Kai's just said, the media sector, and I think arts and culture are incredibly important. I'm always one of my heroes from the dim distant past is the anti-slavery movement in the UK. So the abolitionist movement, and the work that they did and the way they got the narrative out there. Yes, we've all heard of William Wilberforce, probably one of my biggest personal heroes, and we've heard of the other leaders, but the Clapham sect, which was the group of folks who lived in Clapham who came together, was peppered with artists and poets and painters. They were the social media of the time. And so the business leaders and the politicians recognized that actually you had to get into the art to get that message out there. And I think it's so, what we have at our fingertips these days with social media, and yes, fine, it's got a lot of challenges and a lot of problems, but the ability to get these stories and these visions out there in incredibly powerful ways, I think is huge. And it's something that we as a sector have not really embraced perhaps as well as we could. So absolutely, we need the newspapers, we need the social media, but we need the artists, we need the painters, the poets, the singers coming on the journey with us. Anne, you've patiently got your hand up there.
Yeah, no problem. Yeah, thank you for your thoughts. And yeah, I'm come from the user research and user experience part, and interfaces are a big challenge here. We have the Life Center Design initiative, and there are already tools in place. But like you said, I think a lot of the scientific community, and together we need more stories to tell, and to looking for people who can tell them for us, to create the pictures, the stories, the art for us, so that we have we can push the narrative today. And also, I thought a lot about solar punk. So it's also a lot of art, but without the business aspect. And I think, even though I'm also not a business person, I think since we have a lot of tools and a lot of solutions at place, do you think we also now the business part needs to come more together with the solutions and also with the art, so that like I said, the thoughts from my Güppel, so that we can also imagine that it's working. I mean, the Wiseman report is a story to tell, maybe a little bit. Wiseman is, for me as a German, yeah, it's not sexy, I have to say. So
Yeah,
maybe we
that's
need
fair.
more sexy stories. It can be sexy, it's okay, but Wiseman is kind of
Yeah,
a
it's a
plain
bit
tool.
boring.
So we need more of that, but more. Yeah, at the moment, I think more glamour around that. Later, it can be more plain again, but at the moment,
Yeah.
we need to be more visible, not in the Trump way, but more visible. Say, hey, there are the good things we
Yeah,
have
yeah.
already. Please, here you can use it, and if you don't lose it, you are dumb, kind of.
I just love the idea that we need to make sustainability more sexy. That's as a 50-year-old European male, I'm struggling to know how to do that. But
So
thank you, Anne, for the challenge.
So I'll put the one more for that question. There's a very good analysis I put in the chat too for everybody, because Systemic actually called it shock therapy, right? So I'd like you to all have a look maybe at that report, because it really analyzes very clearly how the sustainability movement failed to have this sexy part or narrative. I find it's really good. It speaks very well to this, let's return to very conservative and ultra-conservative values, but at an individual level for security or other reasons. And I think that there's a lot of this thinking of how to get to other narratives, which is already contained there. So anybody who's interested, I really would suggest have a look at it. I think it's really worthwhile for that.
Fantastic. Hamza, I'm conscious that we're at half past the hour. Micah, you've got your hand up. Is there time just for a quick final comment?
Just a very quick one. So I put storytelling there because it's absolutely super powerful, and the impact, of course, is depending on what story is told. And our big issue, I think, today is, and I did expose myself to 3 hours worth of political activity last night, because I figured if I have an opinion, then I should actually listen to the whole thing.
Wow.
And
well done.
Pardon?
Well done.
Well, there's many a book and many a pamphlet that I put aside after 2 or 3 pages because I couldn't read it. Anyway, so our big issue is, how do we convince people that the story we are telling is the truth? Okay, so like, it's not just invoking arts, it's not just invoking, comics, social media, and so on. Like, number one, we have to have the story. Number two, we have to frame it so that it talks to people, depending on whichever target audience we're looking at, whether that's language, color, whatever it is. And then, how do we distinguish ourselves from the untruths? I'd like to leave it there.
Wow. I think that is a brilliant point to leave it on. I'm not even going to try and answer that. But that is a beautiful challenge. Thank you. I think it's a really important one.
Thank you.
Hamza, back to you, I think.
Yeah. I guess like we had like very nice session, very nice discussion. I loved all the questions that are coming up, and the session is recorded, so we will be going back to them and trying to find solutions to this. So thank you very much, everyone, for joining us for your discussion. Thanks to you, to Martin, for your great presentation. We will definitely be coming back to you, and going to integrate your future fits in our approach. And I was very surprised that you have also included our approach in your slides. That was very nice. And I already have some ideas where to integrate it. So we will be reaching out to you like soon, and then we will develop from there to support also the future fit approach to make it yeah, I don't know, integrated tools for it. There's develop some softwares and so on, maybe also together with Micah and what they want to do regarding accountability. So we will look into those things.
Fantastic.
All right.
Well, thank you all for an amazing conversation. Thank you for engaging with it. It's been an absolute pleasure. Please reach out to me on LinkedIn if you use that, and let's keep the dialogues going. Thank you all very much.
Yeah, thank you very much. Ciao, ciao.
Ciao, ciao. All the best. Bye-bye.